Hello and welcome to another Cam Does Data. Today we're going to be looking at Data Lemur. If you haven't heard of Data Lemur, it's made by Nick Singh, best-selling author of Ace the Data Science Interview, if I can talk. You want to come on here, create an account, and then he's got stuff, SQL, statistics, machine learning, probability, Python, a bunch of different stuff. So you want to come on here, just go to SQL, and then start running your way through these problems. Easy, medium, hard. There are a lot behind the premium as well, but you can still learn plenty just from the free problems. And today we are actually going to be looking at one of the easy problems, a histogram of tweets. Now, most of these, they say are sourced from various companies, like Twitter, New York Times, Microsoft, LinkedIn. So I have no way to verify that. I'm just going to assume that they are telling the truth. So let's take a look at this question. Again, I will leave a link to the question in the description if you want to come and solve it yourself, which I suggest you do. You might want to code along as we're looking at things. Assume you're given a table of Twitter tweet data. Kind of a tongue twister there. Assume you're given a table Twitter tweet data. Write a query to obtain a histogram of tweets posted per user in 2022. Output the tweet count per user as the bucket and the number of Twitter users who fall into that bucket. So in other words, group the users by number of tweets that they posted in 2022 and then count the number of users in each group. So why are we doing an easy problem today? Well, I wanted to try something a little different. I wanted to do something a little more visual to kind of help you understand what's happening with our queries, like what SQL is doing behind the hood. So we're going to try something a little different, and I wanted to start with an easy question because making the video has become a little more difficult. I guess you'll see what I'm talking about, but let's just take a closer look at this. Now, when you look at this data, you see we have user ID. You'll see we have a repeat here, 111, 111, 111. And then underneath that, you'll see we have 254. And then underneath that, we have 148. Now, this is just an example, but this example is what we're going to build our query off of. So keeping that in mind, what we're going to do to get this tweet bucket over here, we're going to count these. So these two each have one. Each of these have one tweet. 111 up there, as you can see, he has 3 different tweets. And so this is how we're going to build our bucket, right? So we need to build our bucket, and you can literally picture this as a bucket. So we're going to have a bucket. And we're going to say, let's call this the 3 bucket. And then we will call this the 1 bucket. So everyone that has 1 count, which will be 254. So he's going to come in here. 254 and then 148. User 148. They both have 1 count of a tweet. So they're both going to end up in this little bucket here. And then the user 111, since they have 3 tweets, all of these, they're going to have 3. They're going to be in here in the 3 count bucket by themselves. Technically, what we're grouping by is the user ID. That's exactly what we're going to write in our select statement. We're going to group by user ID. So this is exactly what's going to happen. When we group by user ID, this is what SQL looks at. It says, all right, user ID 111 has 3, user 254 has 1, and user 148 has 1. So we're grouping by that to get the count. Now, we haven't created our bucket yet. We're going to first group by the user ID to get the counts. So this will give us 3. These will each give us 1. So now that we have those counts, then we're going to take that, and we could do it in a CTE. That's most likely what I'll do. You could do it in a subquery, like within a where statement. There's a lot of different ways you could do it. I prefer doing it in a CTE because it separates out the logic. You know, you take all this logic up here and you have it completely separate from all the rest of your query. So if you need to change anything within your CTE, you can easily do it because it's everything that's in those parentheses is all you're changing, and it may or may not affect anything else. The problem with subqueries is it gets really messy because your logic is basically built into your query. Your logic is right in between your query. So it's really hard to go in there. It's hard to decipher too when you're coming back. Try and do this. Think of it as for yourself and also your future team. When you're coming back to look at this SQL code again, it makes it a lot easier if you separate it with a CTE and take it out of that main query. That way you're not trying to dive in here and figure out what the heck is going on, what is doing what. It just makes it a lot more difficult to understand. So we are first going to group by user ID to get those counts, like I just showed you. We haven't created our buckets yet. We're going to get our counts. All right, so we're going to select our user ID because we need it to, if I can spell, we need that to group by. Then we're going to get our count. Now we could count anything, or you can just put a star to count everything. And let's count that as tweet counts. Or if we want, we could call that tweet bucket. I don't think that's too confusing. You want to be careful when you alias stuff. You want to keep it clear so, again, when you come back to it or your team comes back to it or whoever in the future is looking at this, it's very clear what this is. That's really the purpose of aliases. That's why you don't want to do like as A, as B. Just do it so it's clear up front, so it's so much easier when you come back and look at it. Now I'm going to do, I could do count. Let's do tweet count. It just makes it super clear. I could do tweet bucket, and then that would save us later on having to rename it. But again, let's keep it clear. So let's go like that. So we have our user ID. We have the count as tweet count. We're getting it from the tweets table, and we're grouping by the user ID. And so that is going to give us this. So you see the two that have one count here, and then you see this guy has 3. 111. Now, there is one little problem before we go any further with this. Remember, we wanted to get where the tweets were in 2022. Right here. They're posted in 2022. So technically, this one is not going to count from 111. You know, they have 3 tweets, but they technically only have 2 tweets in 2022. So we're going to deal with that real quick. So where... Now here, there's a bunch of different ways you can pull the year out. I'm going to show you one. Now, obviously, you want to run the where statement before the group by. So you go select from, then you do any joins that you're doing, then you do a where, then group by, then having if you need it. And then down here, you can do limit and order by first, then limit. So now this is going to give us our tweet counts. So let's call it tweet counts with tweet counts as, and then I'm going to indent all of this just so it's a little more clear that it's part of that CTE. So that's our first part done here. We now have the tweet counts, and we're only going to get 2 for that one user. Oh, sorry, I misspelled that. Put too many E's in it. I just wanted to show you the output. So now you can see that we are getting the correct thing here. We're only getting 2 because now we're looking at the year 2022. All right, so now that we have our tweet counts, let's go back and look at this again. So we have everything for the year 2022. So this one right here, this one did not count, remember, because it's 2021. So we are counting these 2 from 2022. So this user has 2, and then both of these users each have 1. So now we're going to create our little buckets. So this is our one bucket. Now again, we're going to pull this user and we're going to pull this user. So we're going to have 254, we're going to have 148. I'm just visualizing it so you can kind of see exactly what's happening with the buckets. I think it's clear. So this is our 2 count bucket. And because we only have one user that has 2, this 111, he's going to go in here. So now what we need to do is create these buckets. How are we going to get those counts to be in buckets? So we have our user ID and we have our count. So if we group by user ID again, it's not going to do anything. But if we group by count, that's going to give us our bucket. Because all the users that have 2, we're grouping by everyone that has 2. So that's going to give us our 2 bucket. And then all the users that have 1, we're grouping by all those users that have that count of 1. So that gives us our 1 bucket by grouping by the count instead of by user ID. So that's exactly what we need to do. So we need tweet bucket. We need the user's num, and so this is the bucket. So this is the 1 bucket, and this is the 2 bucket. All the users who had 1 will end up here as users num, if that makes sense. Again, we're getting our bucket. This is our bucket, but now not only are we grouping those in our bucket, now we're going to get our count. So how many users are in that bucket? And how many users are in the 2 bucket? Only 111. So we want our tweet count. This is our bucket. Now we're going to rename it. This is why I was saying we could name it up here, but just to be explicit and make this as clear as possible, I just called it tweet count because it's not that hard to re-alias it right here. So now we're going to count again, and again you can count by something specific depending how you're grouping, or you can just count by star to count everything. Now this is going to be our users num, our number of users that are in that bucket. So we're going to pull this from our CTE tweet counts. So I want to separate these a little bit. And now we are grouping by, instead of grouping by user ID like we did up here, remember we're grouping by that tweet bucket. Now, can you do this? This is another thing we're going to discuss real quick. I thought of recently a way you can figure out the SQL order of operations or order of execution. There's a lot of different ways you can pronounce what it's called. But basically, SQL does not go from select and then to the from and then to the group by. It doesn't go from the top down. So I came up with this little saying recently. Frog jumps were getting heavy, sucking only leeches. Now, if you want to come up with your own saying, that probably makes more sense. This is just how I've been remembering it lately. The saying doesn't mean anything. It's just how I remember the order of operations that SQL does. Starts from, join, where, group by, having, then the select, and then the order by, if I can spell here, and then limit or offset, which is kind of a similar thing. This row right here, that's how SQL is processing everything that you're putting into it. So this is called tweet count. In the select statement, I am setting the alias as tweet bucket. So looking at this, it goes from, join, where, group by, having, select. So my select is right here. Does this alias exist yet? Can I use this alias in the group by? Remember, group by actually runs before the select, so I can't use that alias. If I want to use that alias in the order by, which I'm actually going to do because they want you to order by the tweet bucket. In the order by comes after the select. So that alias does exist in the order by. It doesn't exist when I did group by. So I can't use it in the group by. This is one thing that really tripped me up early on in my days, like when I first started learning SQL, I was so confused why sometimes you could use the alias, sometimes you couldn't. Like in the having you couldn't, the where, like I was so confused why you could use it sometimes and other times you couldn't. It made no sense. But now when you understand the order of operations, because the select hasn't run, the select is where that alias is getting created. So I can't use that alias in the group by, but I can use it in the order by. Now in the order by I could do either or because it still knows what tweet count is. Like I can show you here. We'll just do that. But just know that for future reference, if you're getting really confused why sometimes you can use a reference, sometimes you can't. Also, if you haven't been using references, again, it's really helpful. Instead of just leaving your columns named like count or max this or whatever, leaving it the really messy, ugly looking column name, you'll thank yourself in the future. Again, a lot of these problems are just for practice, but it's good practice to get in the habit of using good aliases. So in the future, when you come back, it's so much easier to understand. So we will run this so I can show you that you can use tweet count or tweet bucket. So here's tweet bucket 1 and 2, user nums 2 and 1. Now here I'll change it so I can use tweet bucket here as well, and then run it again, and we get the same thing. Tweet bucket 1 and 2. Users num 2 and 1. So let me zoom back out here. I guess you can't see it because I'm in the way. But that's exactly what we wanted. Tweet bucket and users num in that order. Now this is on the sample data. I can't remember if on Data Lemur if they have a lot of test cases. Like on some of these practice websites have a lot of test cases. So you can run your query. You know, when you click run code, it'll run it on one test case. But then when you click submit, it runs it on a bunch of test cases. I can't remember if it does on Data Lemur or not. It looks like it just runs it on that one test case. As you can see here, my history. That's the cool thing of Data Lemur and kind of why you need an account. You can see my history here. The first time I saw this was back in August of last year. And then when I came to it after a year, I guess I forgot something. I don't know what I did here. Let's take a look. I don't know what happened here. See, now count, that's the count, group by user. Yeah, that looks right. Tweet bucket from counts, group by count. Oh, that might have been an issue right here. See, this is poor, like I just said, using aliases. Try not to use aliases that are a keyword from SQL. So I aliased this as count for some reason. I called this counts. I should have called this tweet counts. So let me see if this still errors out. No, it works. I'm surprised it wasn't that. I see what the problem was. I forgot to do the where. Again, we wanted it only in 2022. So I forgot to do that. Let me zoom in so you can see this better. So I forgot to do the where clause here. So you can ignore all this. This is just bad. Don't do that. So yeah, again, I will leave the. Here's the. I'm going ADHD real quick, going on all kinds of stuff. I will leave the link to this question in the description so you can come and look at it, try it yourself. You can come here to the discussion. Any advice for noobs like me? I only get the first subquery. What is the approach and how do you get better at this? It is only an easy question and I was unable to solve it. That was one thing I was going to say. It says this is easy, but because you kind of have to do a CTE or a subquery to get and create that bucket, it can be a little difficult. But yeah, if you want to come on here and go through a lot of these different things and just see various different ways you can solve this, that's the best way to learn. Don't just copy everything I'm doing. Don't just watch videos and follow the tutorial and just copy and paste. That's not learning. You want to get to where you're thinking about the answer, thinking about how to solve it, thinking about why you're solving it in a particular way. You know, if you want to sit down and start drawing something and like draw a diagram and draw the buckets and point to them and figure out, all right, how do I group by a certain thing to get those buckets? And speaking of drawing, that's one thing I want to try and add to some more videos. Now, again, this was an easy question, and this was also a longer video, I think because of the drawing aspect and trying to go a lot deeper into the why. I could have done this video 3 minutes long, but I really want you to understand exactly what's going on and why you are doing it. So if you have any constructive feedback for me, go ahead and leave it in the comments. You can follow me here on YouTube, follow me on LinkedIn. The link to my LinkedIn is also in the description. And other than that, I will see you in the next SQL video.